My name is Jared Brown, and I'm the master distiller of Sipsmith Independent Spirits. We are established rather recently. Born in 2009, we're the first new distillery in London since Beefeater in 1823. It took us 3 years to kick that door open and to get a distilling license, mostly because no one alive in the British government knew how to issue a distilling license. We are a very traditional company. Primarily, we produce London Dry Gin. That's definitely our flagship product. I met my partners Sam and Fairfax, who are the founders of the company, at a Negroni party at the Beefeater Distillery in, I think it was 2006 or 2007. At the time, I was working in the south of France as directing the restoration of Exposition Universelle de Vin et Spiritueux, a museum of wine and spirits founded in 1958. Sipsmith, what would you like to know? At Sipsmith, we set out to make an uncompromisingly good and historically accurate London Dry Gin. In creating the formula, I began with a recipe from 1736 from a distilling book in my collection. I worked through 9 recipes up to the mid-19th century, at which point there were about 12 different styles of gin available. We know London Dry, we know Plymouth, we know Old Tom, but there was a table gin, a cordial gin, a fine cordial gin. There was a cream of the valley, there was a Liverpool gin, there was a Manchester gin. These were all different. I made small batches of all of them to understand where London Dry fit into the historic context. But at each step of the way, I also remembered it had to be the right gin in a gin tonic and in a martini. So I made each of these drinks. I also made sure that it always answered the one simple question everything must answer: is it good? All of the historic research in the world doesn't matter unless it answers the question, is it good? And to this end, I tested it on neighbors who were not in the business, who had said they didn't like gin.
Fully participating neighbors, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, so I would serve a little cordial glass of this after the meal. And they knew that it was something that was homemade. They didn't know that it was made in the distillery. And I got their feedback. And they later discovered that they actually liked good gin. As for marketing, no. There was some tremors early on when I explained that we would not be using charcoal filtration on the still, though I'm very partial to Norwegian black birch charcoal. In this case, I suggested they put a jade Buddha in the still because I just wanted the spirit to go in peace. They said no, but they said it could be a real problem because most people, when they market spirit, talk a lot about the filtration. And I said, simple solution, don't hire a marketing person. We'll be fine. Part of being a traditional gin and using traditional methods is that we do not make a gin concentrate. Virtually every gin on the market today is made by overloading the still with exponentially more botanicals than are needed for the gin run. And then what you end up with is a gin concentrate. And you add maybe 20 mils or as much as 25 mils of that into a bottle, and the rest is just neutral spirit and water. That's gin from concentrate. We don't do that. We make our gin from a one-shot method, meaning I load the still with spirit and just enough botanicals to run that batch of gin. When it comes off the still, the only thing I add afterwards is water to cut it to bottling strength. So that is gin from a one-shot method. It gives a different flavor profile. It gives a different delivery of the botanicals, a different mouthfeel. It's more true to the heritage of gin.
To be honest, it makes perfect sense.
It does, but it does not make economical sense if you're running 500,000 or 600,000 liters in a year. If you can do that on a small still if you work from a concentrate. There's one company that proudly says they're small batch because they have a 450 liter copper pot still, but they're producing something like 600,000 liters on it. So if you do the math from that, running 270 days, business days of the year, one batch a day, that means they're putting 21 mils into each bottle, and the rest is neutral spirit and water. I prefer my gin the old-fashioned way. We had an understanding from the start. First and foremost, we're making gin to drink. Whatever we can't drink ourselves, then we let other people drink. Actually, when you talk about the Sipsmith VJOP, the very juniper overproof, there has never been a product like it. It is the first time this has been done in the history of gin. I consider it my master's thesis in a bottle. It's the first gin to contain the full juniper flavor spectrum in a single gin. There are three ways you can introduce the juniper into a London dry gin. You can do that by macerating the botanicals. You load the still with the alcohol and the botanicals. You turn the still on just to warm it up. You turn it off and you leave it overnight or for 24 hours or over the weekend. Then you turn the still on and you run that batch. And the botanicals, the juniper, has been stewing very gently, slow cooking. Or you can run a distillation without maceration, load the still with the alcohol, the botanicals, and turn it on and run the distillation. There, the juniper only cooks in the time of the distillation. So it's not nearly a slow cook process, but it's still very cooked. Or you can load the botanicals into a botanical basket or a carder head high up in the still so that the still only contains spirit down below. The alcohol vapors rise up, they kiss the botanicals on the way to the condensing coil. It's like steaming carrots versus cooking them into a soup or slow cooking them in a crock pot. Completely different flavor from each. I wondered about how it was that no gin contained the full juniper flavor. So I worked on combining these, and I discovered why it had never been done. It was nearly impossible to do. It took me 3 years to bring these together. And making gin is like conducting an orchestra, but with one string, one woodwind, one brass, one percussion. This is the first one that had 3 violins, all playing the same music, but one playing right up against your head, one out in the car park, one wandering around the bar. Bringing them together and getting them to balance was the biggest challenge. I needed 75% more juniper to pull this off, but that created spikes in the flavor spectrum. To suppress that, I had to raise the ABV, and that brought down the spikes and settled the balance. So this was not intentionally overproof. The overproof came about simply to balance the flavor. I wasn't out to make a Navy strength. I was out to make a full juniper spectrum gin. So this is the result, the very juniper overproof. I love mixing with the VJOP. Even a single measure into a gin tonic, smell the bubbles. It's the only time they will smell like juniper. I love it in a Negroni. Some people like it in a martini. I prefer, if I'm going to have it in a martini, that it's a 50-50, equal part vermouth, at which point it's imperative the vermouth is fresh. Vermouth is a wine. It breathes, it rots, it dies after opening. So a fresh vermouth equal measure to the VJOP beautiful martini. In the Negroni, it's the first Negroni where the gin has equal fighting strength to the Campari. And it makes a very balanced Negroni. So those are my favorite serves with the VJOP. We're very happy to have people come visit. We offer tours to the public in the evenings. And it's a great spot to visit. We're now out of our tiny garage and we're into another garage, but it's nearly 10 times larger. And we've gone from one 300-liter copper pot still to two 300-liter copper pot stills and a 1,500-liter copper pot still. We started with prudence and then we added patience and now we have constance.